Today I'm having a conversation with Ken Sim, the mayor of Vancouver. Really looking forward to this conversation for a while. How are things with you?
Things are going great. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome, awesome. I want to get right into it. There's a topic that I want to talk to you about, and of course, it's Bitcoin. You're known as the guy who wants to start a strategic Bitcoin reserve for Vancouver. I want to start off with asking you a question about a comment that you made in a previous podcast. You said that fiat is going to zero. Can you explain why?
Yeah, and I do want to qualify this with the fact that I'm not giving investment advice. Legally, I'm not qualified to give investment advice. So these are just my views. And in the Bitcoin world, everyone knows don't trust, verify. And so after my comments, please don't take it as advice. Yeah, I think fiat's going to zero. You just sort of look at first principles. The fact that there is no restricting the money printer, and governments around the world, they're printing more and more money every single day. And when you look at the fact a lot of these nations, including Canada, including the US, we're running some pretty big deficits. And there's no way we can cut the level of spending, and you can't increase taxes because people flee your country. So the only thing that's left in the toolbox is printing more money. And I think we've all experienced it. Like even in the best of times, so to speak, over the last 5 years, grocery bills have doubled. I don't know a single person who hasn't seen their grocery bill double. So that basically means in the last 5 years, the purchasing power of our currency has decreased by 50%, and it will continue to decrease. So yeah, I stand by that comment. I think fiat is going to zero.
I think it'll trend to zero forever. I definitely agree with you. I think we're going to see a dollar buying right now. A dollar buys what, 700-800 satoshis Canadian dollar. One
Yeah.
US dollar buys 1,000-1,100 satoshis or so. I think that number is going to trend to zero forever. Do you think there's a bottom for this, or it'll keep low? It'll keep falling forever. Like, do you actually think it'll go to 10 satoshis, 1 satoshi? Do you think Bitcoin will
Yep.
eventually go to $1 million, $100 million?
I believe so. Yeah. So let's rewind back a little bit. Even without Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
like think of the origin of the pound sterling. Back in the day when it was issued, a pound sterling would get you 1 pound of sterling silver if you traded it in.
Right.
Today, it's worth about whatever, $1.70, $1.80 Canadian, and a pound of sterling silver is worth about $1,000. So we've already seen massive debasement, in the history with some of the world's most, the strongest currencies, former, you know, um, you know, um, global currencies. And so it's happened before. It will continue to happen. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin, it's the first time we have money without the glitch. The fact that you can never create any more of it, and something that no one on this planet has ever seen before, and it changes everything. So yeah, I do believe things will trend basically to zero, and Bitcoin, you can make an argument that it will hit $100 million. But at that point, no one's ever going to be looking at dollars anymore. Everyone's just going to say, you have one Bitcoin, or you have 100 million Satoshis, or 20
Yeah.
Satoshis, or whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I don't think most people are going to get to 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 satoshis, to be honest. I think that's going to be probably the ceiling, and then after that, the number of whole coiners is going to keep dropping. I think the maximum will probably be around 1 million, and then
Yeah.
it'll fall from there. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe that's true as well because, well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and a lot of it's
Yeah.
already held. You have whales and dolphins and octopus and fish and what have you. And so when you strip out all those people, there isn't a lot of Bitcoin left for, common folk like you and I, as an example. Sorry, I don't know your background, but I'm assuming you don't have, 10,000 Bitcoin
Yeah, I don't. I
out
don't.
there. So yeah, it's already limited. And then what happens like over time, these Bitcoin are either going to get lost or people are going to cash it in for other things, at which point in time they'll be accessible to other individuals. But the price is going to be completely different where, unless you're a billionaire or whatever, you're not going to be buying full Bitcoin anymore.
Yeah. Can you explain your thoughts on why you think that Vancouver should have a strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Yeah. So, stepping back, I think so. For your viewers, I'm not a politician. I'm an elected official who is a reluctant politician. I have no aspirations to be Premier British Columbia or Prime Minister of Canada. I just want our city to be a place where our boys, like my four boys, can and will be able to call Vancouver home. And so, we can get into all those details, but the fact of the matter is, Vancouver has to succeed.
Bitcoin is generational wealth, and to secure it, you need to make sure that you take self custody. Most of you still haven't taken self custody, and you're taking a serious amount of risk by leaving your Bitcoin on an exchange. Don't be one of those people who lost all of their Bitcoin by leaving it on an exchange that went bankrupt. Instead, reach out to the cybersecurity experts at The Bitcoin Way. Their patient and thorough one-on-one training teaches you how to self custody your Bitcoin properly, how to run your own Bitcoin node and protect your privacy, and how to set up de-Googled privacy phones to make sure that nobody is spying on you. They can even help you explore Plan B residency programs to maximize your family's options. So when you're ready to go down the right rabbit holes, schedule a free consultation at www.thebitcoinway.com/Rajat. The best investment you can make is buying Bitcoin. The second best investment is securing it properly. Make sure that you don't delay because your generational wealth and self-sovereignty are at stake. Go to www.thebitcoinway.com/Rajat to schedule a free consult today.
And putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, I truly believe will set the city up for the next 100 years. Because I can tell you, even with everything we're doing, and we're a fiscally responsible administration, and we're going to make things way more efficient, and we're going to be very prudent where we spend money and what have you. Even with all of that, we can't outrun the debasement of our currency that's happening at about 10 to 15% a year, year over year over year. And if we don't put Bitcoin or something stable, you can make an argument for gold. I just think gold's a really crappy form of Bitcoin. But if we don't do something, what's going to happen is the city of Vancouver is going to run out of money. Like, we may have the money there, but it's going to have zero purchasing power, and we're going to be in trouble.
Very unfortunate. Yeah, I completely agree. Have you considered how Bitcoin could solve the housing crisis that we're seeing today? Has that been something that you've thought about,
You
worked
mean
on?
from a city perspective or from an individual that's living on our city perspective? Because those are two different things.
Either way, actually, I'd be
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts on both.
Yeah, okay. And so maybe I'll demystify it a little bit. Like, let's talk about gold, and let's look at some real examples. So I remember hearing a stat that the average house price in Vancouver has not changed in the last 100 years. So I had to prove this to myself. And so I went back to 1995. And back in 1995, the average house in Vancouver cost $500,000. And in 2022, the average house cost $2.43 million, or it went up 383%. Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when priced in gold, back in 1995, the average house price was 958 ounces of gold. And in 2022, it was 957 ounces of gold. So it didn't change. So, and
Yeah.
we can get into, well, you pick 2 points and you cherry pick, but if you look over that same time period and you strip out the outliers, there's only a variability of about 11% up or down in terms of
Yeah.
gold, but it went up like multiples in terms of fiat currency. So what that means is dollars have lost their purchasing power. So as a resident or someone looking to buy a place in Vancouver, if you had gold, you would have been okay, right? And so because your all your hard-earned effort and money that you earned, if you put it in gold, it maintained its value. And so in Bitcoin, right, it's maintaining its value. And so when you look at the price of a home in Vancouver and pretty much across the planet, in terms of Bitcoin, house prices are actually going down, and they're going down significantly. And so if you're a resident, if this continues, and if you believe in this, let's say you can buy a Bitcoin now for like 87, 80, or I'm using US dollars, so let's say 120, 130,000 Canadian.
Right.
And in 5 years, you can buy a house for one Bitcoin. Well, basically, what you're saying is you could buy a house now if you put down 120, $130,000 Canadian and just held it in Bitcoin. So yeah, it
Yeah.
does. If that plays out, then you basically have housing affordability for a whole generation of people who wouldn't have access. When it comes to running the city of Vancouver, yeah, basically, when we make our city more efficient and when we have a store of value that maintains its purchasing power, all of a sudden the materials and stuff that we have to buy 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now are going to go down in terms
Yeah.
of Bitcoin, which means the level of property taxes we have to charge our residents who live here, which is a true cost to residents, goes down, and it becomes more affordable to live in the city of Vancouver.
Do you also think that housing will go to zero in terms of Bitcoin? Because fiat, I mean,
I
the way that I see it. Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think house prices go down to utility value.
Hmm.
So instead of becoming a store of value, well, and people do this, either consciously or subconsciously. Like, people say, look, it's a great store of value, so I'm going to buy a house because my dollars are melting. Or what it usually sounds like is, I got to try to get into the market now, or I'll never get into the market. So by de facto, they acknowledge the fact that their dollars are becoming worthless. They just don't know it, right? They think real estate's going up. And so, yeah, it's become a store of value right now, but it's a super inefficient store of value. It's not divisible, it's not transportable. There's high transaction costs. You have high maintenance costs, all that stuff. And you can put your money in Bitcoin. And if it continues to do what it does, it's an incredible store of value. So I think what you'll see people migrating, debasing or not debasing, demonetizing real estate to its utility value, and they're going to be pushing their money into Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think there are so many downsides to owning real estate over Bitcoin. I mean, the list just goes on forever. You don't have to deal with maintenance. You don't have to deal with repairs. You don't have to deal with tenants. You don't have to deal with realtors. It just keeps going. Honestly, the have you considered the downsides of I know there are a lot of people who are foreign investors that are buying real estate in Vancouver. I mean that obviously has an impact on the prices. Have you considered the downside of them not bringing their money into Vancouver anymore? Could do you think that could happen?
Yeah, I think that could totally happen.
Hmm.
It's not a great situation either way, and it's a great situation either way. I know, people, politicians have weaponized whether or not foreign investors are a good thing.
Yeah.
First, I don't think it matters, at the risk of taking some political shots with what I'm going to say next. I don't think it matters where the source of investment comes from, right? Let's say the investor in an apartment is from Vancouver. What they're doing is they're providing capital to build a house that someone else can live in, right? And so if I'm a renter, what I would love to see is more houses available because I don't have the capital, or I don't want to put the capital down. And so if someone else is willing to take on that risk so I can live in a place, that actually provides myself choice. And I think it's great. And so now the next question is, should we care if that investor is from Vancouver or from Ontario or from Guadalajara? It shouldn't make a difference as long as it's legally sourced and that person is providing utility through investing in units that I can rent. That's great. I think the better question we should ask is not whether or not something there's a foreign investor. The better question should be, of these units, how many are being rented out to locals
Hmm.
who want to live here and work here? If they're all being rented out to locals who want to live here and work here, then we should celebrate it and we shouldn't even be having this conversation. Does that
Yeah.
answer part of your question?
I completely agree. I think it's important that the people who live in your city are the ones who are able to buy the houses. I mean, right now, I don't think I live in Toronto, and I don't think that's possible for most Torontonians. They
Yeah,
can't buy a house in Toronto because it takes 10 years to just save for a down payment,
yeah,
and it's terrible. It's getting worse over time.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and at some point, I hope we get to the point, and I think we will get to a point where we can have really pragmatic conversations around or decisions based on, do I want to rent or buy? And it could be a choice versus, you're scrambling just to find housing.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, it's almost like you're renting because you're forced to, and then everybody's going to tell you that you're wasting your money. And
Yeah.
that's not a good situation to be in. I feel like that's a terrible situation to be in. Just because, I mean, either way, you feel terrible because either you're going to be paying a ton of interest and you're
Yeah.
going to be stuck to this house for the next 30 years, or you rent and you never own a house. Either
Yeah.
way, it's you're not winning either way.
Yeah.
And I don't personally like that.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, in the current situation, it's really challenging because people are getting debased, and they're like, we're talking, the ability to people to even find a place to rent or buy. Okay, so when your currency is getting debased at 10 to 15% a year, like we see situations where two doctors living in the city of Vancouver can't afford to live here.
Wow.
So yeah, no, that's a problem, and there are a lot of things we can do in the city to make it more efficient and easier to build, so the cost to build is a lot lower. Um, but yeah, like I'd love to for us to get into a situation where once again, the value of the homes actually goes down to utility value, and then your people are making a decision whether or not they should be buying a house or renting a house, and it's a fair conversation. And so right now we have a situation, if you're holding dollars, you're going to get debased, and your value, the purchasing power of your dollars is going to become less and less every single day. Right now, Bitcoin, as it's currently set up, with a 21 million Bitcoin cap and can't be manipulated by anyone. It's actually a great store of value where it's actually, it's keeping its value. So people can actually, when they're on the Bitcoin standard, they can actually afford a house now.
Yeah. What are the biggest bits of pushback that you get for starting a strategic Bitcoin reserve? I know 99% of people don't understand what Bitcoin is. What
Yeah,
are the things that you get?
it's a lot. It's a lack of education, and it's a lot of
Hmm.
rhetoric. And so, I'm the type of person who, we base our decisions on data and research, right? And so, and remember, I know you saw a previous podcast of mine when I described when I first was, when my son first came up to me and said, "Dad, I want to buy Bitcoin," and I literally said, I apologize for this next comment, but you touch that shit, and I'm going to punch you in the throat. And
I've seen
obviously, I
that. Yeah.
wasn't going to punch him in the throat. He would have, first, I wouldn't do that. Secondly, he probably would have, got me in a noogie, and he's way bigger than me. But the point is, I was a skeptic, and I have the same things on my mind. Bad for the environment, takes up too much energy. It's used for illegal activity. It's a Ponzi scheme. We're talking tulips here. The technology isn't sound. Blah 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 blah. And then I got curious. I got basically orange pilled by Jeff Booth. I read the Price of Tomorrow, but I also read another at the time 12 books all around money and Bitcoin and token economy and layered money and what have you. Went to a bunch of conferences, spoke with a bunch of people, and I completely flipped. I unlearned everything I learned and learned what was really going on. Unfortunately, we're still early, so a lot of people still have those, false beliefs, and people need to do the work to understand that it's actually great for the environment. It's going to save the environment. Uh, Only dumb criminals use Bitcoin if they think they're anonymous because everyone gets caught on it. It's an immutable record that no one can change, right?
Yeah.
The technology is sound. It's been around for 16 years now. Exchanges have been hacked, but the actual blockchain has never been hacked. There's a million Bitcoin sitting in a wallet for the whole world to see. It's still there. Um, so it goes on and on, right? Like, it's the greatest invention ever. And oh yeah, it's the number one performing asset on the planet, 11 out of the last 14 years, and over the last 16 years in total. So to not even think about this, adding this to a strategic reserve would be completely irresponsible. And as mayor, I wouldn't be living up to my fiduciary duty if we don't look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree. I think it's so scary that people haven't even put in an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours learning about this thing. They just go based on the headlines, and they make their decisions based on really nothing. Even you were mentioning earlier that I think it was offline. Maybe you mentioned it in the podcast as well, but you mentioned that you're not a CFA, so you can't provide financial advice. Keep in mind that most CFAs don't even understand this thing. Most
Yeah,
CFAs are giving me pushback. I've had multiple CFAs unfollow me on Twitter
yeah.
because I started posting about Bitcoin, and I genuinely think that if you're a CFA charter holder and you haven't studied Bitcoin, you're not doing your due diligence.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. So the couple of comments I'd give to your viewers here is one, doesn't matter what we say on this podcast. Okay. If you ignore everything we talk about, bear in mind, there are 650 million people that own some piece of Bitcoin right now. It has the network effect. It will be at over a billion in the next year. And in 5 years, it probably is ubiquitous. Okay. And so if you stick your head in the sand and if you don't get curious, you will be left behind. Bitcoin does not care about you, doesn't care about any government, country, corporation, individual. It's this thing that's completely independent of everything, and it's getting adopted around the world. And so you have to get educated on it because we have a massive problem that no one even, or most people don't even know that's there yet. And when it blows up, it's going to be very painful for the people that are not prepared.
Yeah, that's the most difficult thing for me to wrap my head around. Most people don't even know what the problem is. And so I was watching one of your videos on YouTube. I think it was a news segment, and you had mentioned how Bitcoin is going to take over everything. Every comment on it was negative. There was one comment that was saying this guy's doing the right thing. Everybody else is just they're ragging on you. They're saying, "Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a crypto bro. He's this. He's that." I mean, they don't even quite they don't understand the point here. Are you able to explain the difference between, let's say, crypto and Bitcoin? Because I know what the difference is, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, so I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Okay, so but I do see use cases for a whole bunch of different cryptos. Okay, but I choose to be a Bitcoin maximalist myself. I used to own ETH, Solana, Cardano. I've dipped my toes in with DAOs and NFTs. To be curious and to understand the technology and what have you. The big distinction is there's only one Bitcoin. There's only one thing on the planet that's completely finite. There's only going to be 21 million of it. Every other crypto you have, like Bitcoin's a non-issuer. No one's issued it, right? Versus every other crypto out there, there's like a CEO or a person or a company, okay? And it could be altered, it could be changed. And so that one distinction is everything. Now, I don't want to dump on, the other cryptos because there are going to be some that survive, right? And we've had tokenized economies forever, and there's different use cases. So if you look at Tether, for example, right, it's great from a transactional perspective. If let's say you're in Argentina and you want to, have a U.S. dollar-based, token to transact in every day, well, then, right now that could be for you. I look at, Canadian tire dollars or Aeroplan miles, right? Aeroplan miles, those are tokens. Let's call it what it is. And Aeroplan at one point, I don't know if it's the case now, had a market cap bigger than Air Canada. So
Wow.
there are use cases for this. The one thing that we're focused on in the city of Vancouver, or at least myself personally, and I hope our team agrees, is we need to get this on a strategic reserve for us to preserve our purchasing power. It will
Yeah.
set up the city for the next 100 years, and that's the distinction. So I'm kind of one of those guys. Even though I'm a Bitcoin maximus, I'm not going to call everything else a shitcoin because there are some use cases for them. But for what we're trying to achieve at the City of Vancouver, like at this point in time, while we celebrate the whole crypto community, this what we're trying to do is specifically focused on Bitcoin and its finite number of Bitcoin.
I see what you're saying. So I agree with you, but I do think that the majority of altcoins are complete scams. I think that if they're trying to compete with Bitcoin, they're going to have a very, very, very difficult road ahead. And there could be some, let's say, for example, some people say that, oh, Ethereum is going to be a decentralized internet or whatever that means. I don't know exactly what that means. I haven't done the research on it. I'll tell you that up front. But I do think that every coin is going to trend to zero in terms of Bitcoin forever. And the way that I see it, if at some point I need these coins, I'll sell some of my Bitcoin to buy them.
Yeah. Look, I can't predict the future. But when you look at it, so if something's trying to be like Bitcoin, You're not going to replace Bitcoin. It already has the network effect. And literally, from a technology perspective, the only time you see someone or people switch over is if something is 10 times better than the existing technology. So I don't think, I can't envision anything being 10 times better than Bitcoin if you're trying to replicate Bitcoin. If you're looking at the transactional nature of it, with what's going on with layer two, Lightning Network, what have you, this stuff it's growing at hyperspeed, and all these different applications and use cases that are being built on the Bitcoin, blockchain are absolutely amazing. So, I think Bitcoin's here to stay for a very, very, very long time.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve? I don't know if it's official yet. I think it is, but
Yeah,
what are your
they're
thoughts on
actually discussing it today, and I'm sure it's
it? Oh,
happening
perfect.
right now. They did announce that they're going to create a strategic reserve, and they're going to add Bitcoin plus a bunch of other coins. I know it's ETH, but like maybe Solana and Cardano, what have you. Um, I think it's healthy. First, they're putting a stake out there that they want to be the crypto capital of the planet. So you have Bitcoin and crypto. Two, uh, it looks like they're going to add Bitcoin, not just hold on to their current 200,000 Bitcoin. But let's say they don't add any more Bitcoin. That's 200,000 Bitcoin that's taken off, the market for good.
Yeah.
That's 1%. Is that 1%? Yeah, just under 1% of the world's supply of Bitcoin. And there's not a lot of Bitcoin. Looking at it a different way, it's about 1/6, less than one or more than 1/6 of all the Bitcoin that will ever be mined going forward. That's a
Wow.
big number because we're already at what, 19.8, almost 19.9 million Bitcoin issued. There's only another 1.1, 1.2 million left, and the U.S. just took a couple hundred thousand Bitcoin out of the market for good. So it just adds to the strength of Bitcoin.
I think if anything, it gives more certainty that supply isn't coming back, because a lot of people were so worried that the U.S. government is going to sell everything. What you said there, 1/6 of what's going to come to the market over the next 120 years. That's a really great perspective. I hadn't even thought of it that way. Once you see it from that perspective, it just makes it so that the last few decades of Bitcoin production is pretty much gone.
Yeah, in fact, I think over the next 10 years, um, over 99% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist
Hmm.
would have been mined. And that's it,
Yeah.
right?
So
You
the
have another 100 years for the next
yeah,
1%.
100 years of supply is gone. Basically, that's insane. That's crazy. When you think of it from that perspective, it just shows you this thing is going a lot further than people think. I mean, I think we're so early. Most people were so worried, just based on my comments that I've gotten on my YouTube videos, on my Twitter posts. Most people are so worried because Bitcoin is dumping and it's dropped 3 to 4%, and they're worried that it's going to zero. I think that just shows you how early we really are.
Yeah. Well, and look, I'm not a trader, and there's a lot of theories around, why things are, go up and down so quickly. I actually think the volatility isn't a bug; it's a feature, right? It's the only true market that's open 24/7 that isn't being manipulated. And so, when someone needs liquidity on Sunday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, our time, maybe it's happening in Japan somewhere, they can sell, and no one's stopping them. And so it does. There are no guardrails. But at the flip side, someone's able to sell and someone's able to buy, and it's true price discovery. I think it's actually great. And what
Yeah.
the other thing is, when you have all these different parties, be it the U.S. government, federal government, or 23, 24 states in the U.S., you have El Salvador, you have Bhutan, you have the UAE, you have the Czech Republic, you have Belarus, you have BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK Investments, 2 other dozen ETFs, you have family offices, all buying Bitcoin for the long term. What happens, I think, And once again, I don't follow it, so I don't track what happens on the blockchain. But there are people that what they call weak hands that they sell based on they either need the money at that point in time or they get a little skittish. But there's all these different groups that are backstopping it, and so they're just picking it up and then they're keeping it forever. Oh yeah, I forgot MicroStrategy.
Yeah,
They're buyers, right? And so
huge.
every time a Bitcoin sells, the odds are someone who buys it, they're holding it for the long term. So you're going to have this price fluctuation for a while, and then one day we're going to wake up and there are no more weak hands. Then what happens, right? Like all of a sudden, there is no supply, there are
Yeah,
no sellers, um, and then based on supply and demand, you know what happens next.
yeah. I'm really impressed by your in-depth knowledge of this. I can see that you've done the work. You've put in so much time to really learn about this thing. I wanted to ask you a question that I ask all my guests here.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think is the most important downstream effect of Bitcoin? So how do you think Bitcoin will change the world in 10, 20, 30 years?
Oh my God, how much time do you have? It's going to change everything. First of all, this whole narrative around the environment is complete bullshit, right? The reality is it's actually great for the environment. I'm an environmentalist, by the way, okay, but we're pragmatic. We just look at data and, we actually want to solve it. We don't want to wave a flag and pretend we're solving something. So, when you have natural gas that's getting flared off and you can repurpose that energy and actually have less pollutants hit the atmosphere, that's a good thing. When methane is seeping out of the ground from former garbage dumps and what have you that have been filled over, we capture that methane and we repurpose it. Once again, good for the environment. When there are renewable energy projects that can't get built because they can't get financed because there isn't demand for them. When Bitcoin miners that are location agnostic say we'll buy all your excess power, these things actually get financed and they get built. Guess what? That's great for the environment because these are renewable green energy projects that never would have been financed. So I think it's great there. From clamping down on crime, popular to popular opinion, blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain is an immutable record that can't be changed. And so only dumb criminals think that they can hide. They get caught. And there's all this technology now that can see where, when wallets move coins back and forth, you can catch them on the on and off ramps. So now you might have a challenge enforcing it if if the off ramp is somewhere in Russia, but for the most part, right? I think it's great. It will actually make our place a lot more secure. So the list goes on. Oh, and the glitch around money, right? Right now, we are forced to be consumers. We are forced to overproduce stuff. If you're an entrepreneur, you are forced to gamble and invest your money that you've earned into the stock market because your purchasing power is getting eroded. If we had a store of value that was sound, that doesn't depreciate, that can't get debased, all of a sudden our time preference is different. We don't have to race and chase stuff. We don't have to chase returns because we already got them. So it changes everything.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things you mentioned earlier with Vancouver having to save in dollars and just constantly losing purchasing power. I think even businesses are impacted by that. With what you're saying here, the time preference. So have you heard of tahinis by any chance?
I have, but I don't know what it is. Can you refresh my
Oh,
memory?
so tahinis is a shawarma business, and they started buying Bitcoin a few years
Yeah,
ago.
I remember. The conservative candidate for prime minister actually went there and transacted in Bitcoin. Is that the one?
Yes,
Yep.
that's the
No,
one.
I
That's the
saw
one.
the video. That's where I remember it from. Thank you.
Yes, that's the one. So the point that I was going to make is, in their case, they don't have to be forced to buy more locations and expand and expand and expand. They can just hold on to their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think it's very similar to how a government would operate, right? So in a government's case, if you have extra cash, you know it's going to be debased, and you're forced to do things that you may otherwise not want to do. So with Bitcoin, essentially, you can hold onto your reserve, and you don't have to constantly be worried about the debasement. And again, that goes into the time preference that you were mentioning before. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a real life example. So at the city of Vancouver, we have $3.2 billion in fixed income instruments that are earning 88 basis points to just under 5%. But the reality is they're losing between 10 and 15% of their value, purchasing power. So let's say we're only losing $300 million in purchasing power. We have a $2.1 billion budget. So if we increase property taxes by 2.9%, or let's say 3%, that's whatever, $60 million. And people are okay with that. But if we increase it to 6%, now we're talking $120 million. People would lose their minds. And no one even blinks when our fixed income, our conservative investment, is losing $300 million in purchasing power. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And so that's the problem that we've highlighted, and we want to daylight it. And yeah, we look weird. People think that we don't know what we're doing. But when we show them this, they're like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, really. And we're okay. We're okay. Like I said, I'm not a politician. I have no desire to be a premier or prime minister. I ran for mayor because our four boys didn't see a future for themselves in Vancouver. We want to fix the problem.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we want to do. So we're okay if people misunderstand us, because we're doing it from a good place full of love and empathy, and we just want to solve the problem. And we got
for sure. So if you don't mind me asking, when do you think that strategic Bitcoin reserve for Vancouver will be, I guess, set forth?
We still have a few more challenges. First of all, we, getting a little political here, or talking about the process that we have to go through. So we had to file a motion to ask our team members or our staff to explore looking at Bitcoin. And I can tell you that was a tough one. A lot of our counselors, or a lot of the counselors in that chamber, were not on board because they were afraid of the blowback, because we're early and politicians get attacked. And so we did get that one passed. But when the staff come back with the report, we're going to vote on it, and it's going to be a tough one. And so we have a by-election. There's two candidates we're running on April 5th. And if they win, they are supporters. They understand Bitcoin and they understand why it's important. So if we win those two seats, then we should be able to pass the motion that talks about Bitcoin. But then we have to go to the province, and because they're the only ones that can give us permission to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And so, and they've already said, no, they're not going to do it. Yeah. So the next thing we need to do is get the entire Bitcoin community to, I'm not going to say put pressure on the provincial government, but let the provincial government know. And by the way, we have a great working relationship with the provincial government, so we don't pick sides, whatever. Our experience with the current provincial government has been great. So I don't get political on that side stuff. I don't pick a side. But I think it's incumbent upon the Bitcoin community, anyone who's educated on this, let their elected officials know. Either they're in office or they're trying to be in office. Let them know why this is important. And I can tell you, the last election in BC was decided by 11 voters.
Wow.
11 voters, because there's one riding that won by 22 votes. And if 11 voters voted the other way, then it would have gone to the other party. And the current government that has a simple majority of one seat would have a minority government that could be, bounced out. And so I'm not saying we do that, very far from it. But what I'm saying is these politicians they're aware that a small difference could affect their election outcome. And so the Bitcoin community has a lot of say in the next election, and they should let their voice be known.
I think even what you're saying there, I think that's a high time preference decision, because people are worried more about getting their career continuing. They want to get elected again. They don't want that blowback. So they're not thinking about the long-term impact of Bitcoin, and they're not studying it. They're not putting the work to really wrap their head around it. That scares me. When I see politicians who are specifically trying to get reelected, and that's what their policies are based on, I think that's a terrible thing.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to bash any politicians here,
Of
but what
course.
I can say is we come from a place of, or at least myself and our teammates, we come from a place of we don't care about politics, right? We just want the right answer. And so during this journey to get Bitcoin on the balance sheet, we've brought in thought leaders, like some of the world's leading thought leaders on the topic, to educate our counselors and our team at City Hall. I can tell you there's been two counselors that are completely against what we do, and they refuse to show up to any of these educational sessions to get educated on the topic. So it's disappointing, but the reality is sometimes you have politicians who, they're more concerned about optics and getting elected as opposed to getting educated and making sound decisions. And that's just what we have to deal with.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. I think that there's a massive opportunity here to just orange pill as many people as possible in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Can you let my audience know maybe where they can find you, if they can ask you any questions, if you're doing anything else on the side to work on helping more people understand this?
Yeah, well, the work we're doing is through City Hall. Like
Mhm.
my role as mayor, so we're daylighting the conversation. We're talking about why it's super important, um, and we're leading by example. And so, when we do what we do here, like as we know, a lot of Bitcoiners are closeted and they're afraid to come out. So just by coming out on this one topic, we've given people, license to come out and be who they are. Now, when we pass this Bitcoin strategic reserve, if and when we're successful, it gives every other city in Canada cover to actually say, oh, we can look at it too. We're not the first ones. We don't have to take the risk. And so that's how we can sort of get the word out. Now, if people want to reach me directly, they can visit ken.sim@vancouver.ca. So that's ken. Should not visit. They can send me an email. So ken.sim@vancouver.ca and just type in the title bar. I love Bitcoin. Or I'm
I like
Bitcoin curious, and we'll respond.
Amazing, amazing. I really appreciate your time, Ken. Thank you so much for this. I think that this was an amazing conversation. I think people are going to learn a lot just from how bullish you are. You've said so many things that even blew my mind. I mean, the part where you said how 200,000 Bitcoin is what 20% of what's going to be available in the next 120, 130 years. That's just insane.
Yeah,
Really appreciate your time, Ken.
great.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for spreading the word and orange pilling more people.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Great.
Let me close this off. Give me 1 second. Stop